Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be potting up my pothos today. This is the variegated version that I purchased on Etsy, and this is a top cut version. It's huge, as you can see from all of the leaves, and I want to show you guys how I'm going to pot it and make a trellis for it, or something for it to grow up to, so then that way it can create these wonderful large leaves. If you put it into a pot and you don't have anything for it to grow or to latch onto and to grow upwards, it will create smaller leaves. So I'll show you guys how I do it. And this is the pot that I got from, I think, Home Depot. It's really pretty and it's extremely heavy. I really like this pot. It was kind of on the pricier side. So I'm just going to show you how I mix the soil and then how I'm going to make the trellis. So this is what I'm going to be using. I actually cut down the bag a little bit, but this is the Miracle Grow potting mix, and I find that this is a very good mix for pretty much a lot of plants. And I'm also going to be using this pearlite. I like to mix my own soil just because it's easier for me and it's also inexpensive. I find that I like a lot of pearlite. For me, it's just cheaper to make my own and it's super easy, so I'm just going to show you guys how I mix it. So this pot is actually pretty big. It's hefty. Usually I will use sand in it as well, just because sand is also really cheap and it's a great way to add more drainage to your soil. But the reason why I'm not going to use it is because this pot is extremely heavy. I don't want to add any more weight to it, especially when I'm smaller and it's harder for me to carry these around. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start scooping the soil into the pot. Now you can pre-mix your soil first. A lot of the time people will just put it into a different container and then pre-mix the soil. So usually I'm just going to eyeball this, but I try to have at least 30% perlite in there just for drainage. And I also really like the way that perlite looks when there's a lot of it sitting in the soil. So what I'm gonna do is I put in a few containers of that, and then I just scoop up the perlite, throw it in there, mix it up really well. So what I've done is I filled it up almost all the way up, but not quite. I left a few inches in there. The reason is that I'm actually going to be putting the plant in, and so once I put the plant in, I'm going to put more soil on the outer side, on the outside. Now I'm actually going to be putting this to the side because I want to make my trellis, and that trellis is actually going to go in here, probably on the side. So I'm going to show you guys how I make my trellis. So what I'm going to use for my trellis are just these two branches. I got them from my backyard. They're not fancy at all. They're just the birch branches from my tree. And then to kind of increase the humidity a little bit, I'm going to use coconut coir. And this is the same one that you can get at the store, at Home Depot, at Lowe's, whatever, that sell gardening supplies. And this is great for just keeping a little bit of humidity, especially when the roots are growing. You know, I use this for some of my orchids as well, the vanilla orchids that have vines. If you don't have these coconut coir, or if you don't have access to it, you can also use sphagnum moss if you have them. The reason why I'm not going to use sphagnum moss is because I use a sort of expensive brand, and it's harder to work with because they're all like little pieces, whereas this is just a whole sheet, so it's just easier for me to work with, and I don't think it really needs sphagnum moss. And to tie up my coconut coir to the branch, I'm going to be using these strings. These are Raffia strings. They're pretty natural and they will break down over time. You can also use fishing wire. Fishing wire is a great way to create that natural look, and from far away or even from a few feet away, you really can't tell that they're there because they're clear. Let me see. I'll cut it up into smaller pieces. Actually, this looks like a pretty big piece, so I might go a little bit smaller. I'm not going to wrap the bottom because the bottom is going to be sitting inside of the pot, but probably from here. So I think I'm going to be wrapping it like that, and then I'm going to tie it down. Just grab a piece and tie it down. It seriously looks like a sausage or something. It's kind of cool looking. And it might turn out pretty good. That's what it looks like. So it just gives it a little bit of a different look. I honestly don't hate it. It reminds me of food, and now I really have to eat something. Just keep going with your wraps. So I finished my 2 sticks. They look like meat on a stick, really. I mean, they look like I could barbecue them. And probably they might look kind of funny, who knows? But I like it. It's not too bad. And I'm gonna go back to my pot now. I mentioned before that I didn't fill it all the way up because I'm going to make room for the plant. And pull my plant out, and look at how many roots there are. And the time that it's been sitting inside of this vase. It's a really fast growing plant, and the new roots are shooting out like crazy, and it's going to grow upwards. So this is where that new growth is. And put this plant in. Just gently. I'm not going to place it all the way down because I don't want to hurt the roots. But I'm just kind of eyeballing it right now. I'm going to turn it this way so you guys can kind of see it without that giant leaf. So that's what it's going to look like. And I don't want to bury it really deep down, but I do want it to be pretty stable. And that's kind of where I want it to go. I'm going to put it in the middle. And then just kind of move the soil into that hole closer to the roots. Now this soil is not packed yet, and that's why the plant is still kind of floppy like this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to fill up this pot with more soil all the way around. And this is where pre-mixing your soil will come in handy, unlike me who's lazy. If you pre-mix your soil, you would already just have the soil ready to go and pour it in. But I'm going to have to do a little bit of mixing here with the perlite. So I pour it in. And then I'm gonna have to go and throw in some perlite and mix it by hand a little bit in here. Okay, so I do have enough soil in there that what I'm gonna start doing is just patting it down. You want to pat it down gently but firmly. You don't want to, like, you know, do CPR on it, basically. You know, it's not gonna be like really a lot of pressure, but it has to be firm enough that the plant isn't going to move. And I can see that there's a little root right here, and this is a new root. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna put a little bit of soil right in this area, and it's just going to keep it from getting too dry, just for this cutting, only because it's still new and I don't want it to dry out. And I also have like really terrible schedules with my watering, especially indoor plants, so this is just going to help it from drying out too much, especially on days where I'm not taking care of it or I forgot to take care of it. From what I can tell, and I think you guys can tell too, is that there's less plants or less leaves on this side, and the leaves tend to be more over towards me. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the meat skewers over on this side where there isn't as many leaves, and I'm going to train the new growth to go this way towards the meat sticks. Okay, I'm gonna put the other one in, and I actually chose 2 branches that had like other branches coming out of it because I wanted to give it more surface area basically to grow. So here's what it looks like. You can see that the plant is kind of leaning this way, or it's growing more this way, and I have my 2 trellises, or whatever you would call them. I used to call them meat sticks, but now that I'm thinking about it, it might not sound so great or right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just kind of train this growth over here. So I'm gonna get a little bit of this string, and I don't need this to always stay around, so it's okay if they break down over time. The reason is because eventually over time this new growth is going to start attaching itself with the roots to this stick, and it's not going to need this string anymore. So very gently what I'll do is I'll just tie it around this new growth. And don't tie it too tight, because this is the new growth and it's still going to grow bigger, and it's gonna want to, you know, move on its own. It's gonna grow on its own, and it's important that you don't tighten, if you don't tie it too tight, and make sure you leave just a little bit of space for it to grow, because they are going to get bigger. Now, if you want to stabilize these a little bit more and keep them together, you can also tie these together. It will also add to the look of the trellis. And it'll also help the plants, actually, because it'll create a surface area for it to attach itself to. So here's what it looks like, the final version. I don't hate it. It's not too bad. You do want to grow them indoors if it gets to be too cold. Now my winters are a little bit on the colder side, so it's a good thing to bring them indoors. But if you are lucky enough to be in a warmer climate, you can grow them outdoors. Alright, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, everyone.